is Focus with Jack Cottle.
And good evening, I'm Jack Cottle. Welcome to this month's edition of Focus. This month we're talking about the upcoming Civic Center Expansion vote coming up on March 10th here in Rapid City. Four guests with us to talk about that. Richard Wallstrom, he is a financial advisor by trade, also a member of the Fix the Plan Vote No Committee. His partner here on the panel today, Jerry Munson, a former Rapid City alderman, former Rapid City mayor from 2001 to 2003, also a member of the Fix the Plan Committee. Now for the expansion, Mac McCracken, he is with the Civic Center Expansion Task Force, former state legislator from 2001 to 2008, and Tony DeMauro, the general manager of Murphy's. He is also on that Civic Center Expansion Task Force. A little history first. The Barnett Arena down at the Civic Center first opened back in 1977. Now a project to build a new arena was proposed in 2012. Now also in 2012. Important thing happened. A letter came to the city from the Department of Justice regarding what was then called an American with Disabilities Act complaint about the facility. Request for proposals for the project went out in 2013. In July of last year, the City Council approved the blue concept for the arena, which meant building on to the existing arena, keeping the existing arena, and building in addition to that contingent on financing up to $180 million on the project. The Council approved that. Petitions were turned into December to put the financing for the project up to a public vote on March 10th, and that is where we are today. Now, the cost of the facility, one of the big topics being debated, $180 million, the biggest expenditure in the city's history, roughly $160 million for the new arena, upgrades at Barnett Arena, and also about $20 million for a parking ramp. So I guess the big question is, can the city afford that?
Yes, Jack, the city can afford that, and I've had a number of conversations with Pauline Sumstra, who is the city finance officer, and if you were to take a look at the revenues, the financing, that just like the sales tax issue, the sales tax that's been brought in 2014, and of how the Vision Fund operates, where the money goes into the Vision Fund, and over the long term, yes, we can afford this because Pauline also had prepared for me the bond payments of what would take place through the 30th year, the monies that would be accumulated, left over for other projects. Bottom line, Jack, yes, we can afford it.
Now, Tony, you're also with that group. Do the numbers make sense to you?
Sure. I think back to 1972, and what's amazing is that when they created this tax, they didn't have any idea what would happen with it and how much it would grow. And the fact of the matter is it's grown so substantially that it's so large, we've actually split it into two parts, which is fantastic. And we have so much in this fund that it'll cover the $11.4 million annual payment and then some. And if the fund continues to grow, there'll actually be a surplus every year. And what's great is we have 40 years worth of tax data to show that we can do this.
Now, Richard, at the coffee talk the other day, you said one of your concerns is the cost of this. Can the city afford $180 million?
Well, it kind of depends what you mean by can the city afford it. I liken it to a homeowner with an annual income of $75,000 might be able to afford a $300,000 home if they put every single dollar from their budgets, short of groceries, into the mortgage cost. The problem is that the $180 million obligates the next 30 years of cash flow from this, and it pledges the next 30 years of cash flow from this sales tax revenue stream. And the cost of that is also the opportunity cost of what we will not be able to do because we have put all of our eggs in that basket.
Jerry, you're a former mayor of Rapid City. You were into some of the financial issues during that time. How do the numbers look to you as you look at this project?
Well, Jack, one of the reasons I was happy to join the committee of 7 that I'm on is that we're all concerned about what the numbers really mean. And one of the major things that I have a problem with as I think about this proposal is not just that it's $180 million, is that by their own estimates, it could climb to almost $400 million in debt, in obligation over the 30-year period. Now, there are people that are going to argue one way or the other about whether it's $400 million, but let's just talk about that for a second as well. There hasn't been anybody that said we know what the bond payment's going to be because they don't know what the interest rate is until they apply for it. Now, how's about this, Jack? Why don't you go down and look at a brand new pickup for yourself, and why don't you have the salesman tell you, well, Jack, that's going to be $45,000 for that truck, and you look the guy in the eye and you say, well, how much is my payment? And now think about whether you're going to buy this truck if he looks at you and says, well, I don't know, Jack, just sign the papers, I'll give you the payment later, because I don't know what your interest rate's going to be. So that's one of my main concerns. But also, you look in the Rapid City Journal from Monday, February 23, just the other day, low tax revenues worry legislators. Well, I'm with them. I'm worried about it too. The fact that there could be a downturn, we can talk all day long about what the past has shown us, but we've also seen 3 attempted base closings. We've seen 2007 and 8 where millions of Americans lost their homes because the knotheads in Wall Street and in Washington can't seem to get their act together about how to run our country financially. And to say that 30 years out is something that we are so solidly sure of just seems irresponsible to me.
How do you guys look at the future of that? Because there are projections, and granted they are projections. How do you see that playing out over that 30 years?
Okay. There's a couple of things that I would like to visit about first. Jerry mentioned, he talked about Ellsworth Air Force Base, the possibility of it closing. We need to set the record straight on that right now, because Scott Langeth, who's the director of the South Dakota Ellsworth Development Authority, he happens to be in Washington, D.C. this week, and I talked to him yesterday afternoon. And on Monday, he met with the Secretary of the Air Force to discuss some items, and there is no BRAC that's scheduled. I don't know where this information is coming from that they talk about, oh, the base is going to close. There's no bill that's been introduced into the system regarding closure, and Ellsworth is much different today than it was in 2005. In 2005, we had one mission, which was the B-1. Today, we have the B-1, we have the drones, and we also have the financial services system out there. So, you know, you take a look at that. And the other thing, the Powder River Air Force Training Grounds. The Air Force it's the largest in the lower 48. The Air Force has already signed off on that, and the FAA is set to finalize in March of this year. So I am not concerned. Ellsworth is here, it's here to stay, and the numbers talk about it, and the people talk about it. It's here to stay. There's 4,500 people out there, Jerry. There's 3,500 active duty and 1,000 civilians. So I think we can put that issue to rest. Ellsworth is here to stay.
I'd like to talk about the future because it's my generation that, of course, has to bear the burden. The reason why I'm excited about it is because I left when I graduated, just like 70% of my graduating class. And I came back because I feel that we have momentum in downtown that most cities would beg for. And I invested and bought another building in downtown because I feel so passionately about our future. If I was concerned about it, there's no way I would have put all of our homes on the line again and try to roll the dice with a second restaurant, because most fail, 4 out of 5 fail in the first 2 years. So the future is very rosy for me because people are investing, young people are moving back. But part of that is quality of life. They need things to do to compete with the bigger cities that they've been used to, whether it be the Seattles or the Bostons. So for me, this is about retaining that youth, making sure that they either stay and don't leave like I did, or they come back sooner. Because it's these younger generations that are really shaping the future of Rapid City, and they need things to do. And this is really important to make that happen.
Richard, how do you look at those projections down the line to make the payments on this?
Listen, the sales tax is going to grow going forward. I don't think we can, I don't feel, Mac, that we can make any projections about Ellsworth 30 years from now. That's the situation in Washington today, and we both know how fluid that is. But the sales tax is going to grow over that period. There's no doubt about it. Let's remember, though, that the city is pledging that stream of revenues towards this bond issue. Now, we may or may not have level payments because they may choose, finance may choose to do graduated payments. But nonetheless, the collateral for that bond payment is the halfpenny from the Vision Fund, and as well the CIP fund on the other side for infrastructure projects. As long as that is pledged, The only thing that can be spent from that is any excess that is received above the amount that is used for the bond payment. Therefore, we can't bond for, it'll be strictly pay as we go, regardless of how much or how little that is. Some might say that's a good thing. Looking back on the way that the 2012 Envision projects have been funded to date, many of them have been bonded for 5 to 7 years, and we would no longer be able to do that because that is already pledged to this 30-year bond.
Is there risk in this, and how much risk?
I think the greatest risk, honestly, is that we will not be, that something else will come along that will be just as important to keeping our young people in the community and improving the quality of life here as, I would say, another arena, okay? Because if I look at it very simplistically, we're building another arena. And I think that what the Vision Funds have done for our community in terms of parks and recreation and opportunities for our citizens to participate from all walks of life is more important than having another arena.
Well, and if we're going to talk about risk too, Jack, if you don't mind, I would like to weigh in on that. I have some personal experience in the area of risk-taking and whether a guy should or not. And what I mean by that is in 1988, I had been in the boat business for about 6 years. Things were rolling along very nicely. And I was proud of where I was, and the money was coming in an adequate amount. And some people came to me and said, Jerry, you're in your little store down there on Jackson Boulevard down by Ace Hardware, and you really ought to move out by the interstate. Life would be so good because you'd never have to move another boat around your little lot. You could have everything under a roof. Things would be rosy, and the money would just roll in. And these were smart people in business here in Rapid City that are friends of mine still today. And so I thought about it. I thought, well, you know, things are pretty good, and it's a hassle, though, but, you know, I think I'll just stick with what I got and see what happens. Well, guess what? You remember 1989, the rain quit, and it quit in 1990, and it didn't rain in 1991. So by the time that 3-year period was over, 2 of my main competitors went out of business because they were bigger than I was, because they had more debt than I did. And so my personal experience is that when I emerged from that 3-year drought, I was king of the hill. I had the largest volume boat dealership in western South Dakota, and I retired at 41 years old, 4 years later, because the money just almost fell out of the sky with the rain that started late in the year. 2 of my competitors went out of business because they had so much debt they couldn't operate, and they were done. And I succeeded because I stayed in a reasonable size, managed my debt, and didn't get in trouble. That's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this. I want to see Rapid City grow just as much as these good guys do. And these are good guys. Mac was on the Civic Center board when I was mayor, and we both chose Brian Maliski. We worked together on that, and I appreciate Mac's work on that. And Tony's a great guy, a business owner here in Rapid, and I really appreciate what he's doing in the community as well. But it's not about that. It's not about who's a good guy at this table. It's about my own personal experience, and why I'm here today is because I almost didn't make it had I taken the advice that you ought to get big and have this big shiny building. And it would have been a big mistake for me.
I'd like running out of time. They're saying, well, have you guys weigh in real quick on the risk. What is the risk, and is there risk?
Well, I think what we need to talk about a little bit, and Richard, you started to visit about it. You talked about the bonds and this sort of thing, the financing. And actually, with the proposal that's out there right now, we're talking 2 different methods of financing. One is the bonds, and one is the certificates of participation.
Right.
And so, legally, the city could issue bonds up to $120 million legally. But they decided not to do that. They plan on issuing bonds up to $60 million, and then what we're going to call the COPs, the COPs, up to $120 million. And that's the 2 ways of financing this proposal as we move forward. And I think there's another misconception out there. People say, or I've heard this, let's just say that when we're all done, that we, the city, won't own the Civic Center. That is totally wrong. This is a lease purchase operation, and when we're done, we, the city, own it. So on a going forward basis and explaining the COPS, the COP, I think that we need to explain that a little bit further on the next segment.
All right, we do have to take a break. We'll be back when we continue with this month's edition of Focus. I'm Jack Cottle. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus, talking about the upcoming Civic Center Expansion vote coming up on March 10th. Before the break, I want to get to Tony DeMauro from the Civic Center Expansion Task Force. You wanted to weigh in on what you believe is the risk in this whole transaction.
I just want to make sure that we weigh the balance of the calculated risk that we've taken, the 3 years that we've put into this, the $700,000 we've invested, and we make sure that we calculate the risk of doing nothing, because there's a risk behind that as well. And the biggest risk is, for example, I was talking to a gal today, and her friends are going to vote against this because they really want a sports complex for their kids. And I think that's a great project. But what I explained to her today is that most of these projects, for example, the pools, we subsidize to the tune of $685,000 a year. They're not really profit centers. They're good for the community, great for the community, but they don't make enough money to support themselves. So what I told her is that here's what's going on right now. We're outgrowing the current Civic Center. It's broken. For example, the stock show has 158 vendors on its waiting list, chomping at the bit to get in there. The rodeo needs to expand. We have opportunities today, and we may lose things like that if we don't stay competitive. Sioux Falls built a beautiful new arena that would love our stock show. Gillette's chomping at the bit. So the risk of doing nothing is very real. And we have to realize that a strong Civic Center is the key to subsidizing things like the sports complexes and these great things down the road. Because we only have two kinds of tax. It's property tax and it's sales tax. Property is just about enough to take care of the police department. All these other great things we do in our community are funded through sales tax, 36% of it. We need a strong Civic Center to keep that going.
Now, one of the other big things that a lot of people talk about is the size of this proposed facility. Currently considerably larger than the current one, listed seating 5,000 to 10,000 for basketball, 12,000 for rodeo, up to 14,000 for concerts, up to 19,000 with a full set of chairs on the floor. Does that size make sense for what we want here, for what we need here?
Well, Madison Square Garden in downtown New York City seats 18,200. No, it doesn't fit for me. I mean, really, the only case that I can imagine ever needing 19,000 seats for a concert is if Elvis Presley comes back to do another one. You know, short of that,
He's in the building.
It's not going to fill. I think that part of the thing that has driven the cost estimates up is the flexibility, but flexibility is a two-edged sword because it drives costs in trying to accommodate too many different formulations or seating arrangements of moving stuff in and out from the sides. I don't believe we need it that large. I think the expectation of drawing 13 or 14,000 to consistently to large name concerts is pie in the sky probably. Rapid Cityans, I think, are quite happy to go to Minneapolis or Denver or Nashville and pay 175 or 250 or 350 bucks for a ticket. I don't think they'll do it at their own Civic Center.
How about you, Mac? How do you look at the size of this facility? Is it the right size?
In my opinion, yes, I believe it's the right size. When the people sat down originally and they started going through all this thought process and thinking and the Futures Committee and planning for the future, and I know that 19,000 number keeps, you hear that out there, but you're right. At 19,000, that's all the chairs lined up in there like you would for a big concert and then moving forward from there. You have to plan for the future, and that's exactly, in my opinion, what we're doing here in Rapid City. And I just need to tell you, I think as far as Rapid City, the best years are yet to come.
Tony, how do you look at the size of this place?
Sure. The biggest misconception is it's not about 19,000 seats. Okay, we have that capacity if the Pope were in the center, or let's say the President of the United States. I haven't seen either of them come recently, so I don't think we'll have to worry about that. The Civic Center manager that we hired, the great thing about him is that he's opened 3 arenas of a very similar size, actually even a little bit larger, and at a similar life cycle that we are in ourselves. And what's great about him is he knows where our sweet spots are. He knows that we're not going to get Lady Gaga, we're not going to get U2. That's just not going to happen. So he's going to go after what he knows we can do. Our bread and butter, which is 4,000 to 6,000 person concerts. and going after the trade shows. I talked to him just yesterday. He's working on an RV show. They want to take up the entire space 3 times a year when we build it. There are things that we haven't even begun to think about, and he knows that. And so he's not under the illusion of 2 sports teams needing to fill up the arena. He's not under the impression that we need to book Elvis. That may be kind of challenging. He knows where our sweet spots are, and he's smart. And that's what's great about this guy, and I have so much faith in him. And anybody who hasn't got a chance to meet him, give him a call, because once you talk to him, you'll have the faith that it's not about that. It's about 2 rooms that are really flexible, that can, a couple times a year, drop that wall down should Eric Clapton come back and we can sell 14,000 seats. But no one's under the illusion that that's how we're going to make our money. That's just not going to happen.
Jerry, how do you look at the size of what they're proposing down there?
Well, and I've never met Mr. Balzer, the new Civic Center manager, but I have faith that he was selected through the same kind of process that Mac and I did, and he's probably a great guy. In fact, I have to admit that when he said that the study that everybody refers to, the over $708,000 that the city spent on studying various items, when they said you really need luxury skyboxes all around this arena, and that it's going to be for 19,000 seats, and it was based on the fact that the numbers don't work to run the place without professional football teams, and I guess we don't have to talk about how long they seem to have lasted in the past in Rapid City, do we? He said, to his credit, you know, we're not looking for football teams. We're not looking for professional teams. So then I have to ask, if it's so large that it can't make its own operating expenses without doing things that haven't been talked about in public yet, Jack, I think now is the perfect time to start talking about that. And I just happen to have something with me today that couldn't put it more clearly. This is what their own study says has to happen to make the thing pencil, Jack. $5 for every ticketed event is what you're going to pay for the first time in 38 years. You, as a Civic Center attendee, are going to be required to pay $5 per parking spot, where you used to do it for free for 38 years. They're going to have to charge this for a ticketed event, and $3 for other consumer public shows, $4 for the band shell events. And so that raises, over a 10-year period, they show that it's going to bring in $428,000 per year. $428,000 a year in the 10th year is what they project in their own $700,000 study is got to be collected, or the thing doesn't pay for itself to run it. So is it too big just to look at it, talk about numbers of seats? I guess we could differ in opinion about that. But my concern is, how do you run this mammoth building, and how do you not go to other taxes, whether it's the general fund or other places, to make the thing operate without going in the red to the point where we got to pull money out of someplace else?
I can hear you guys stirring over here as he started talking about the parking fees.
Love the sign, by the way. That's awesome. So here's the deal. I think we'd all agree that parking is an issue at every arena. It always is. So we need to talk about how we fix it. And it's not a magic wand that someone takes out and fixes it. It's really a multiple part solution. Here's the first one that Craig is working on: temporary parking. Because for the 4 or 5 times a year, where we're at our max capacity, we need temporary parking, off-site. We'll shuttle people back and forth to those lots, provide that at no charge. Because why build a parking garage, a second or a third one, that's going to sit vacant part of the year? The other is when you charge for parking, which hasn't been decided yet, that's still up for grabs, you actually get people to start carpooling. The average should be 2.7 people per car, according to the national. That doesn't happen here because we don't charge. Nobody thinks about it. And if you charge, those folks that are able-bodied are going to find one of the 6,000 spots that are within a 6-minute walk that may be in downtown, and they're okay walking. So this will actually help fix the problem, in my opinion, should they decide to go in that direction, and I hope they do.
All right, we have to take another break. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the ADA issues involving the Civic Center when we come back with this month's edition of Focus. I'm Jack Cottle. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus, talking about the upcoming Civic Center Expansion vote. You've heard a lot of talk about Americans with Disabilities Act issues. It gets a little confusing. Kind of started an original letter from the Justice Department in 2012, which cited a complaint filed against the Civic Center. A couple of years later, round and round that went, and they said there was not a complaint. The problems, though, have been identified. They have been studied. The city's approved a settlement agreement with the Justice Department. Brought a little time for the city to address those issues. So as you look at the ADA issues, how are those playing into the whole scenario that we're looking at coming up here on March 10th?
Okay, I think all of us would agree on the ADA issues, they have to be corrected. And the settlement agreement that was signed between the United States of America and the City of Rapid City, Mayor Sam Koiker and Pauline Sumsha, who is the finance officer, they signed it on November 14th. We still have not received the signatures back from the United States government, Department of Justice, regarding that. But if you went into the website for the city and looked at attachments A and B in there, Jack, there are a number of issues that have to be corrected in the Civic Center, or in the Barnett Arena. I guess I should clarify, in the Barnett Arena. And once the government signs off on this, and then we would start into fixing the ADA and the other improvements of the $180 million. Some of the ADA problems can be corrected in 12 months, some are 24 months, and some are 30 months, just depending on the scope of the issue. So yes, we have to get those corrected no matter what happens, and I think we can all agree on that.
We do. I mean, clearly we do, Jack. I mean, you know, there's questions about why didn't we know it was a complaint, and why did that only come out recently, that there really hadn't been one. But still, the bottom line is we need to correct deficiencies in the Barnett Arena. And the question is how, and what's the smartest and best way to take care of that and address the issues of capacity and usability to make the Barnett Arena worthy of the 21st century. I mean, because it isn't now, and we recognize that. The question is how to go about it. We are suggesting that the 180 million and building 150,000 square foot additional arena is not the way to go about it, and that only by voting no are we able to go back to the drawing table to come up with a plan B, building on the studies that have been done, but recognizing that if that's the case, the citizens have spoken and said, no, not this plan, bring us another one.
So what is the other plan?
Well, Jack, let me first answer your first question, which is, I talked about how personal the debt is for me because of my own financial situation back when I was in the boat business. Let me tell you, with my mother having an amputated leg and being in a wheelchair for the last years of her life, this ADA issue is intensely personal for me. And just as Richard has said, we're all in agreement at this table. Everybody here wants to solve the ADA issues, and it's intensely personal for me. So I want to see that done just as much as anybody in this whole discussion. So let me just answer that first. And what was your question again?
I forgot now. What is the other plan then? What do we do other than build a new one? Can the Barnett Arena be brought up to speed without building something new?
Absolutely. In fact, their own studies talk about, I know that Tony, when he and I debated at Central, and he did a great job, by the way, but I did notice a lot of the numbers that he had on the plans that he showed, and they do show the $40 million being spent in their own plan that they're proposing in front of the voters on the 10th of March, shows $40 million getting spent in Don Barnett Arena. Now, I don't contest that at all because I think that's probably pretty close to the number that the ADA is going to require to do. But as far as the rest of it, I think now it comes down to a difference of opinion on whether if we spend the $35 million to also do the code issues, or we spend $140 odd million to finish what they want to do, then it becomes a question of we don't have the luxury of $700,000 in studies, Jack, to tell you we have this firm plan about Plan B, But I can tell you that if we did have that luxury, I think it'd come into clear relief that there is an option for the voters, besides having to go $180 million in debt, that we can do something scaled back, still have a better Don Barnett Arena than we have today, not just ADA and not just doing code issues, but we can probably expand it to a reasonable degree and have those seats back that the opponents keep telling us we're going to lose if we do this, and still move Rapid City forward without crushing debt. And that's, I think, the big issue.
And Jerry makes a great point about spending, and I think where I want to draw the line is the difference between spending and investing. We can spend money to fix these things, or we can invest in fixing the marketability. Shows pass us all the time. We lost a show recently to Brookings. For any of those geography experts, that's a smaller city.
Careful, that's my hometown. Be careful.
So it's a smaller city. And we lost it to them. We lost it because the stages nowadays, when Elvis performed, it was a 25 by 40 stage. The stages are now at a minimum 40 by 60 because it's all about the show now. It's all about the video. We lose so many seats in the arena that it just makes the ticket prices unreasonable. They know they can't do it, so they move on. And that's what we really got to talk about is, I think that if their plan could be done cheaper, great. That's fine. But I think that we're not talking about the marketability because their plan doesn't currently address that, and that is my biggest concern.
Tony, I agree really with what you said. The way that I look at it is this. I think it's a false choice to say that it's either $180 million, this proposal, or just do the bare minimum to fix up, the ADA requirements in the existing arena. I think that's a false choice. There's a middle ground. There is a middle ground, and the question before the voters on March 10th is yay or nay on this particular plan. If the vote is yay, we go for it. We work on the final designs and drawings and what's included, and we all work to make it succeed. On the other hand, if the vote is nay, it doesn't go back in a black box for the next 10 years. We have to come up then with Plan B, and I'm confident that there's a lot of people who've gotten invigorated here recently as a part of this debate, and I'm confident we'll do it as a community.
What does happen, in your opinion? If people vote no, we know what happens if the vote is yes. What happens if we vote no?
If the citizens vote no on this particular issue, it's very interesting to me because when TSP went through and they did their evaluation, and I happen to have it in front of me, and they talk about phasing. One of the things in here they talk about under item number 5, closing the facility down for a couple of years to expand and renovate the facility would be more cost effective. However, this approach may not be possible operationally. So let's just think about that for a minute. If we did go in, if it happened, and just close it down for 2 years and do all the things to fix it up for ADA and bring it up to code and everything like that, you think the Black Hills Stock Show is going to stick around? You think LNI is going to stick around? You think things like the sports show is going to stick around? I don't think so. And once they're gone forever. So for future planning, I truly believe that we have to vote yes to get this expansion done. Build the new part first, and that's the plan. You build the new part first, and then we go in and reconfigure the Barnett Center.
As you guys see it, what happens if it's a no vote?
Well, I'm going to turn to Jerry here, but I would suggest this, that we all know that the Barnett Center sits empty, virtually empty for all summer and late spring, early fall. I mean, there are virtually no shows during that period of time. I think there's time to phase things in.
Well, and I appreciate that, Richard, and giving all due respect to Mac, I do have to say this, that if we're going to read something from the $700,000 report, Jack, we ought to read the whole thing. And where he left off was the viability of a renovation and expansion approach for the Don Barnett Arena must also include the development of a feasible phasing strategy to complete this work while the facility continues to operate as much as possible at or near full capacity. Their own study says if you phase it, you don't have to shut it down. And all of the claims about losing LNI, losing the stock show, losing all these events because you got to shut it down for 2 years or go for our $180 million deal, their own study that apparently only gets read the first half of the paragraph in public says you don't have to do that. In fact, the professionals say just phase it and you.
Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus, talking about the upcoming Civic Center expansion vote. That's coming up on March 10th here in Rapid City. A feasibility study done by AECom talks about competition from new arenas in cities like Sioux Falls, Lincoln, and Wichita. The study projects the number of events here going from 449 in 2013 to 513 in 2020 if this is built. Projects net operating income to go from $813,000 in 2013 to $2.9 million in 2020. Also says the economic impact in 2020 would be $60 million if everything is left as is, and $113 million if they build the new arena. Those numbers make sense to you? Seem right to you?
What I would suggest, Jack, is that one can probably hire a consultant to reach any conclusion that he desires. And although I'm going to look back and refer to the Journey Museum, which frankly is a project that I supported at the time. I still do. I patronize it. But the feasibility study for the Journey Museum said that 10% of the people who go to Mount Rushmore would stop at the Journey Museum every year, 200,000. We've never even begun to approach what was projected in the feasibility study done for that. So what I'm saying is feasibility studies, and the further out one goes, as with any projection, the less accurate they become. So I'm skeptical, but I'm skeptical. It's not to say that it couldn't happen. It's just to say that it's a projection. It's a spitball.
Tony, what goes through your mind
when
you look at those projections?
So here's what I think about. I think back to 1972 when 63.8% of the population, overwhelming majority, said, let's do this. And they had no idea at that point that Elvis was going to open their arena in the little tiny town of Rapid City. Nobody knew the stock show would be the juggernaut that it is, contributing $20 million to our economy just in 10 days. No one would have envisioned or imagined the Lakota National Invitational, which everyone should agree right now, race relations are important, and having this ability to bring these folks into our community so that we can begin to better understand each other is critical. So I don't think any study, no matter how much money you spend on it, could ever predict the future. I don't think you could predict it 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or 30 years from now. I believe, and maybe I'm the hopeful optimist, that if you leave it up to the future generations to figure these things out, they will. I can tell you that the folks that I am with that are starting businesses, they have got so much energy and zeal to make this happen. You give it to us and we're going to figure it out. And I don't need a study to tell you that it's going to work, because I know that the people that are here are going to make it happen.
Jerry, what do you see when you look at that study?
Well, I couldn't put it better than Don Frankenfeld did yesterday at the coffee talk at the Civic Center. And he's a Civic Center board member. And when asked to project the Vision Fund revenues, he said it's a dicey proposition. Now, he wasn't knocking their own approach to this problem, but he was saying, let's be honest about it. It's a dicey proposition to look that far down the road and say that's going to be the rosy situation. Now, I'm as optimistic as anybody at this table. You can't be in the boat business in Rapid City, South Dakota, as far as you have to go to water to go in the lake. And not be an optimist. But I will say that I have some concerns. Tony talks correctly about 72, the optimism then, the forward motion of the city then. And I would just say that some of the conditions that have changed, and I'm not being negative, I'm being pragmatic. That's my opinion, is that the United States of America was top dog in 1972. There was no question who ran the world, financially and otherwise. Now, China is going to surpass us next year as the economic superpower of the world. In the meantime, since 72, we've added up almost $20 trillion in national debt. Now, people are going to say, oh, that Jerry Munson, he's just a doom and gloomer. He just doesn't think anything's going to be okay. That's not true at all. I'm just saying the business side of me says we've got things that are out of our control, that if we look 30 years down the road and say everything's going to be rosy, so these projections are rock solid, I just don't know that it makes sense that we don't pull the reins in a little bit, have a little bit bigger facility than we have, solve our ADA issues, and be a little more careful with how much debt we incur with those kinds of things that are different than they were in 1972.
Now, Mac, that feasibility study paints a very rosy picture. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with it. And we got to think back for a minute when we built the original Barnett Center, 1972. That's when we embarked to build it. And what else happened in 1972? We had the flood that came through. And the people united, and we came together. We built the Civic Center. We overcame the flood. And Rapid City is doing a lot better today than what it was yesterday. So when you look at feasibility and you plan for the future, it's for the future generations. It's for our children, our grandchildren, and their children as they come along. It's not about me. It's for future generations. So together we're going to get this done, Richard.
Could I comment, Jack? Just
Sure.
I'll try to be brief. The impact the Civic Center has had on this community is incontestable. What I would suggest, though, is that when we, after the flood in '72 and the construction in '75, we went from having no Civic Center to having a state-of-the-art Civic Center that included not only an arena, but meeting rooms, rooms for trade shows, and so forth. We're not adding to that same degree this time. We have a Civic Center. We're talking about making some of the exhibit space and performance space larger, and I don't believe that will have the same kind of impact as what it originally did, Mac.
And I think you would agree, Richard, that back when we built it, it was built for basketball and tournaments.
It was.
And
yeah.
today's environment is totally different than what it was when we built it. So we need to continue to look forward, is my opinion.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll wrap this all up when we come back with this month's edition of Focus. I'm Jack Cottle. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus, talking about the upcoming Civic Center expansion vote. It is certainly one of the most hotly debated topics we've had here in the Black Hills in quite some time. The vote coming up on March 10th. Early voting already underway. You can, again, go to the polls on March 10th. If you're registered here in Rapid City, we're going to give each person about 1 minute to kind of make your final sales pitch as to why you feel they should vote. By the way, Richard Wallstrom is with the Fix the Plan Vote No Committee. Richard, why a no vote here on the 10th?
A vote no allows us to step back and take a fresh look at the cost and the size. Doing nothing is not an option. You guys have said that. We agree, of course. Doing nothing is not an option. The question is, on the ballot is, should we spend $180 million to build this additional arena? I say no, we shouldn't. It costs too much in terms of what other projects it will prevent from ever happening, number one. And number two, that the operating costs are very vague and range from things that haven't been publicly brought to the table by the proponents, including parking fees and skyboxes and so on, as far as the additional revenue necessary. We need to fix the Barnett Arena, no doubt. I don't believe this is the way to do it.
All right. Mac McCracken is with the Civic Center Expansion Task Force. Why a yes vote coming up here soon?
Well, I have been studying this issue for probably the past 5 weeks now, bringing my learning curve up, and after lots of meetings with lots of people, city finance, city council, civic center, looking to the future. That's where I'm at. You're looking to the future, and when talking about why we need this, if I look at the sales tax revenue that's been increasing, the projections, the money that will be accumulated left over for some projects, and guarantee, and I would assume that in 5 to 7 years, there will be some that we can't do, but there will be a lot that we can do. So I would just respectfully ask for the people's support and their yes vote on March 10th.
Jerry, why a no vote?
Well, I've learned a lot of things in the past couple of weeks myself too, and one of the things is that Sometimes in desperation, things get said that shouldn't be said. And I'll give you an example. The head of the CVB is shown on one of your competitors' stations running a little half-hour segment about the Civic Center and why everybody should vote for it. And the head of the CVB says that property taxes are going to go up. If we don't do this, property taxes are going to go up. And I mean, to Tony's credit, when I debated with Tony at Central High School the other day, he was upfront and honest about it, and I applaud him for that. He said, it's not going to affect your taxes one way or the other, and that's exactly right. So my concern is that over the next couple of weeks, people learn the truth, and part of it is parking's going to cost you. Parking's going to cost you to go to the Civic Center. It's in their own study.
Refute that.
And some of the other things, you know, they talk about in their ad. Now the Civic Center folks have an ad on TV. It says no new taxes. But what about the fees? Isn't it a little disingenuous not to talk about fees as if they don't exist when it's still money coming out of people's pockets?
And Tony, I'm sure why vote yes?
Sure. So there's been a few people that have talked about how long they've worked on this, a few weeks, maybe months for some. Me, I'm about a year. I was invited to the first stakeholder meeting way back in the day with the different restaurants and hotels. But I pale in comparison to the folks that have spent 3 years on this, that have spent almost all of those 3 years. And I trust the experts at the end of the day. I trust our city council folks that we trust every day to keep us safe and make good decisions for us, because they've the ones who've been vetting these decisions along the way. I know Richard made the point that we have two choices, but they've went through hundreds of choices and dozens of plans in dozens of public forum meetings. And I wanted people to understand that we've done our homework. We've done the research to ensure this is a calculated decision and that we can in fact afford it. And finally, the last special election was decided by 350 votes. It was the mayor's city council seat that was vacated. Regardless of how you vote, yes or no, show up and vote. Because we have an opportunity to get folks in our community engaged in voting, because we have a terribly low turnout in this city. So I don't care how you vote.
Just vote.
You gotta vote.
Yeah.
Hear, hear.
Okay?
Just vote.
That's what I'd like to make everybody's point, because at the end of the day, we all want what's best for Rapid City. So learn the facts, vote for what you think makes the most sense.
Are both sides surprised? Are you surprised at how much passion you've seen people exhibit on this issue, both for and against it?
Yes, I think a lot of that passion has really bubbled to the surface after a kind of a vote no committee came to the fore, and although we don't like being painted as the bad guys or against progress, because that isn't true, nonetheless, it's fostered the public debate, and the more public debate and the greater the voter turnout, the more valid the ultimate decision.
You get surprised at how passionate this debate has gotten at times?
The more information that's available to the public, Jack, and the more they get to know the facts, there's a lot more interest today than there was 2.5 weeks ago, I'll say that. And I need to just reiterate that no matter how you vote, yes or no, we want you to show up and cast your ballot.
All right, again, and this is what you'll see when you go into the polls. It will say a yes vote is for the approval of the resolution and authorizes the city to issue the sales tax obligation and proceed with the current plan for renovation and expansion of the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center. So if you want to see this project go forward, vote yes. A no vote is against the approval of the resolution and prohibits the city from issuing the sales tax obligation and will prevent the city from moving forward with the current plan for the renovation of the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center. Again, very important. We get people out regardless of what direction you're going to go. Do you think you're going to get a good turnout?
The young professionals are so extremely excited, I can't even tell you. And it's an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity where me personally, a lot of our generation doesn't vote in the national election because it kind of gets lost in the mix. So this is an opportunity for us, and we've motivated people that I'm just so excited to be a part of this. And I think that's the thing we should take away from this, is getting that community involvement, and I love it. I couldn't be more excited about it.
And I hope we can carry that forward, Tony. I hope we carry that forward after this election.
I agree.
All right, we are completely out of time. We have filled our entire hour. I want to thank Richard Wallstrom, Jerry Munson, Mac McCracken, and Tony DeMauro. Thank you guys for coming up and sharing what information you have on this subject. Again, March 10th, Civic Center Expansion vote. Make sure you go to the polls. If you don't want to wait till then, vote early. That'll do it for us. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again right here the first Sunday night of next month. Good night.